Hello! So today I wanted to talk about camera batteries, and more specifically, the classic filmmakers debate, V-mount or gold mount?
They are developing batteries to work under the most adverse conditions through the tools of modern science.
V-mount batteries were originally introduced by Sony as an alternative to Anton Bauer's gold mount batteries that had basically dominated the entire professional camera battery market since their introduction in the 70s. The gold mounts themselves use 3 golden posts, or pins as they're referred to in a lot of documentation, to basically slide in sideways into a keyhole-like configuration, one of which has a latch that clicks, and there's very little play. The V-mount, on the other hand, actually slides in from the top, and this V-shaped sled actually slides and then clicks into a V-shaped bracket with the pins then at the bottom. Now, there actually is speculation online that Sony developed the V-mount because they didn't want to pay the licensing fees to Anton Bauer for their gold mount mounting system, which I can totally understand. It's just kind of funny that that's how it came about.
Here at the research center, Sony's scientists are at work to develop the company's advanced technology, which should always be in the lead.
An interesting note is that before any of these brick batteries actually came around, the primary way to power a camera was through a battery belt, which is basically what it sounds like. It's a belt that has a battery on it and then has a cord that you would then plug into your camera. Now, let's move on to the issues I've had with V-mount. But before we do, if you have time and enjoy the video, a like is, as always, very much appreciated. If you want to see more like this, a subscription is also very much appreciated. But if not, that dislike button works extra well if you hit it twice. Recently I was on a commercial as a camera assistant, and there was something a little bit strange about the gear that we were using on set. We actually ended up using a lot of V-mounts. Now you see, in the US, most crews actually do use the gold mount system. It's found to be a lot more reliable, and a lot of people really like to vouch for it. But something to recognize is that once you're outside of the US, primarily Asia and Europe, the preferred system actually is V-mount, which is kind of an interesting thing. We initially had a Shape brand V-mount plate, which honestly I thought would be fine, and it was. First battery, no issue. Second battery, again, no issue. The third battery, which was an IDX branded battery, so again, that's a good brand, it shouldn't have any issues. It actually got completely stuck on it. Like, to the point where I couldn't remove it, I could not press the release to remove it. We actually had to take time out of the set, remove the plate from the camera, and then take a mallet to get the battery off the plate so that we could continue to keep using it. The following day, we actually ended up getting an IDX plate in with IDX batteries, so again, you would think it would be fine. We put on battery 1, it's okay. Battery 2, again, fine. Battery 3, whenever you would touch the battery and ever so slightly move it up, keep in mind it's still locked on there, it would actually disconnect the connection. So these could be like little one-off things. It was a different battery each time that had an issue. It wasn't the same battery, it wasn't the same plate. And this is also a problem I've had in the past with V-mounts, where basically if you jostle them or move them at all, because there's so much play in the V mounting structure itself, even from the same brand, you end up jostling them loose. Ultimately though, I think this comes down to the fact that the mounting point itself is so far away from the pins, especially when compared to something like the gold mount, which has the pins right in between 2 mounting points. Top that off with the fact that most of the sets that I'm on actually use gold mount anyway. It just kind of makes sense for me to be a part of that ecosystem and have all of my gear natively run off of that. So does this mean that I now recommend gold mount to everybody and there's never a point where you should use V-mount? Well, it's definitely not a black or white situation, and it really depends on the calculus of what kind of sets you're on, what you're doing, and whether or not a super secure mount is required. Again, I do want to mention, tons of people like V-mounts, tons of people use V-mounts, and a lot of them have never had an issue. However, I'm going to give you some criteria to kind of help you make the decision. First and foremost, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're already using V-mounts and they work fantastically for your workflow, you don't need to change. Also, solo operators, one-man bands, if you're basically working solo or even just mounting batteries to, say, lighting fixtures or things that don't move a whole lot, again, V-mounts might work for you. What I'd recommend though is make sure you have your fixture and try different brands of V-mounts on it. So especially if you have your own self-sufficient system where you're basically providing all the equipment, V-mounts could absolutely work for you. Now, here are some situations where I really wouldn't recommend V-mount batteries. If you're planning to fly your camera on a heavy-duty gimbal, car mount, or even a Steadicam, especially if you're using low mode, because basically that turns the camera upside down, and if you notice, this is a V, which means that you are no longer holding it secure. The only thing holding it is that pin, and there have been many reports of batteries simply falling out because the pin basically fails in an upside down configuration. Now, the reason you don't necessarily want to run it in a car rig specifically is because you can encounter some vibration, some bumps, and any kind of vibration or bump, especially ones that kind of push it up, it can become unlatched, but that's not super likely. And finally, my last suggestion is if you run the camera a lot on, say, an easy rig or something similar, V-mount might not be the best option just because there are a lot of brands that have some play in them. Some brands don't, so if you can find those, hey, it might not be a problem, but that is something I wanted to mention because I've had an issue with it before. So the last thing I thought I'd bring up is if you do plan on being on set in the US at any point in the near future, the majority of the productions in the US, especially near any of the production hubs like Atlanta, New York, Los Angeles, any of those, they're primarily going to be run off of gold mounts. So for the most part, especially in the US, it might be something you want to consider just so you can rent and use different batteries on set without having to worry about it a lot. By the same token, if you're planning to go international, especially to any place in Asia or Europe, you might want to invest in V-mount. That seems to be the system they primarily use. So which batteries did I pick up when I was trying to switch systems? Well, I actually ended up getting the Core SWX Neo 9 Minis, which are some very nice, really powerful gold mount batteries, which even despite their medium-sized capacity, can put out a ton of power all at once. I also got them in a package that came with a quick charger, which is something I actually needed because I was going to switch. If you're switching, maybe get them in a package with a charger, just tends to save a lot of money. Now, the other batteries I actually picked up were the Anton Bauer Digital 90 series, and these, as you can see, it has a little bit of wear on it, and that's because they were used. But the good thing is, because they're made by Anton Bauer, you know that they have really high quality cells inside and they're going to last a long time. I also bought plates for my AC monitor. I actually ended up switching the back plate itself on the Tilta universal battery plate, which really wasn't too hard. Basically what I did is I cut the old plate, cut the wires for the old plate, installed a Dean's connector in the middle so that I could basically have plates that I could swap. So I ended up putting a Dean's connector on both the V-mount plate that I had previous, as well as the gold mount plate. So now I can swap them out as needed. Links to everything I just talked about are down below, so please go ahead and use those if you found this video helpful. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it does help me create future videos. With that, if you have any questions, let me know down below, or hit me up on Instagram, as I'm much more likely to respond quickly there. As always, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.